The only gun ever fired in orbit did not begin a new era of space warfare. It marked the end of one. Some of the Cold War's most secret engineering succeeded exactly as intended. A military space station carried a working cannon into orbit. The weapon fired. The station survived. Yet, almost immediately afterward, the idea it had been built to prove began disappearing from Soviet planning. The question was not whether the gun worked. It did. The question was why success arrived after the strategic need had already vanished. At the center of that contradiction was a modified 23mm R-23 automatic cannon. Originally designed for high-speed aircraft, it became the Shchit-1, or Shield-1 defense system, permanently integrated beneath the hull of the military Almaz orbital station, publicly disguised as Salyut 3. Engineers at KB Mashinistroyenia did not treat it as a curiosity. They treated it as an answer to a military fear. If reconnaissance stations operated above Earth, they might someday need to defend themselves. Inside assembly facilities, the contradiction was visible before the station ever reached orbit. A weapon built for violent maneuvering in the atmosphere was being bolted onto a spacecraft that depended on delicate balance and careful control. The station would carry no rotating turret, no movable mount. Once installed, the cannon became part of the spacecraft itself. Every decision about the weapon would become a decision about the entire station. That choice created a problem unlike anything faced by aircraft or tanks. To aim the gun, operators could not simply swing the barrel. They had to rotate the entire 18.5-ton station using its attitude control thrusters. The spacecraft became the gun carriage. Every firing solution required fuel. Every adjustment consumed resources the station also needed just to stay alive in orbit. On paper, the system worked. In practice, every shot asked an orbital laboratory to behave like a giant rifle. Still, the program moved forward. Military planners continued because the original assumption still seemed reasonable. American anti-satellite capabilities were improving. A crewed reconnaissance station appeared valuable enough to justify unusual engineering. The cannon was insurance against a future battlefield that had not yet arrived. What no one could prove was whether that battlefield would still matter by the time the system was ready. Months later, a quiet detail changed the meaning of the test. The crew was gone. Cosmonauts Pavel Popovich and Yuri Artyukin had already completed their mission aboard Salyut 3 and returned safely to Earth. When the weapon finally fired on January 24, 1975, nobody was inside the station. The cannon, built to defend human occupants, would prove itself only after those occupants had left forever. The firing looked nothing like the popular image of space combat. No pilot squeezed a trigger. No orbital duel appeared outside a window. At the Soviet Flight Control Center, mission controllers transmitted remote commands across the tracking network. Inside an empty spacecraft, the firing sequence activated. The modified R-23 discharged a brief burst into open space. Estimates suggest only a handful of rounds, though the exact count remains classified. For a moment, engineers were watching something no one had confirmed before, a conventional gun firing in orbit. One concern had overshadowed years of design work: recoil. A rapid-fire aircraft cannon could have twisted the station, damaged its pressure hull, or overwhelmed its control systems. It did not. The structure held. The platform remained intact. Conventional projectiles could be fired in the vacuum of low Earth orbit without tearing the spacecraft apart. The engineering question had its answer. But another answer was starting to matter more. While engineers proved an armed station could survive firing its weapon, reconnaissance technology was moving elsewhere. Robotic satellites did not need food, water, life support systems, or trained crews. Systems such as the Zenit and emerging Yantar generations could stay in orbit, gather intelligence, and return photographic film without exposing human lives. They solved the same military problem without building a home for people in space. The cannon had become operational. The station concept had become expensive. That difference changed the calculation. Every kilogram used to keep people alive became harder to justify. Every liter of fuel reserved for aiming a fixed cannon reduced what the station could do. The weapon had answered the engineering challenge, but not the strategic one. If unmanned systems could perform reconnaissance more cheaply and with less risk, why keep building armed orbital fortresses? The comparison did not favor the station. An unmanned satellite never worried about life support. It never required crew rotations. It did not need a defensive weapon, because losing a machine was not the same as losing cosmonauts. The assumptions behind Almaz were shifting faster than the hardware could catch up. By the time the orbital cannon proved itself, the military logic beneath it had already moved on. Only one more Almaz station would fly. It carried no cannon. Plans for additional armed stations faded, while reconnaissance moved increasingly toward robotic platforms. The Shchit-1 system remained a real engineering success, but it no longer pointed toward the future. It became a record of how fast military priorities could outrun even working technology. The final act was almost as quiet as the firing itself. Ground controllers commanded Salyut 3 to leave orbit. Thrusters slowed the station. Its path dropped into Earth's atmosphere above the Pacific Ocean. Heat built across the hull until metal failed. Structures separated, and the spacecraft carrying the only operational orbital cannon broke apart into plasma. Within minutes, the physical evidence was gone. Today, the weapon survives mostly through engineering drawings, archival photographs, mission records, and museum hardware related to its aircraft origins. The cannon that once represented the Soviet answer to warfare in space now points to a colder conclusion. A machine can work exactly as planned and still arrive too late.